Hello again. I'm going to depart from the geek stuff here, which I don't want to do too often, and just quickly say that NFL players do not have free speech rights. NFL player is a job category like Walmart cashier or independent taxi driver or private in the Army. Individuals and citizens have free speech rights. Job categories do not have free speech rights because when you're on the job, you don't have free speech rights. And this is not just me talking. I mean, this has been all the way to the Supreme Court in more than one case. This has been litigated. This is a fact of law. You do not have free speech rights on your job. If you work in an office, try to imagine what would happen if you went into the office one day and posted a bunch of, let's say, anti-abortion posters on the office bulletin board, and then start going around to all your coworkers telling them how abortion is murder. Do you think your boss would have something to say about that? Suppose you're a cashier at Walmart and you put a big political button on your uniform, and you start telling every customer that comes through their line that they need to vote for Hillary Clinton. Do you think that your manager would have something to say about that? Of course they would. You don't have free speech rights at work. Okay? There are workplaces where you can be fired for using profanity. And it's entirely appropriate, because profanity is not appropriate every place. And if you're a salesman at Tiffany's and you have rich people coming in to buy very expensive baubles, they don't want to hear someone talking like they just, crawled out of the gutter in the Bowery, okay? If you're not upholding the classy image of Tiffany's in your dress, in your manner, in your courtesy, in your language, if you're not upholding Tiffany's standards right across the board, you're out on the street. Because you don't have free speech rights at work. Let me tell you something about myself. I work with vulnerable adults, mentally ill people. I can't take a picture of my client. I don't do that full time. I'm also a comic artist, but I do that as every other week as my straight job. It's sort of a part-time job. But I can't take a picture of my clients and post it to social media, even if it's a wonderful picture that makes the client look great. I can't take a picture, post it to social media unless I get permission from the company and the guardian of the client. Okay? I can't tell you a story on my YouTube channel about one of my clients and mention them by name. And I don't care if it's a good story or a bad story. The rule at my company is I can't post any story to social media that has a client's name attached to it or in any way is obvious who the client is. And if I do, I could be fired. Despite the fact that I post the story to my channel when I'm not at work. I'm at home right now. I'm recording this at home. But if I was to tell you a story about one of my clients right now and attach their name to it, I could be fired for that. And I would deserve to be, because I know what the rule is. Nothing can be posted about these clients without the guardian and the company's permission. And there are whole categories of information that can't be posted about them under any circumstances. I can't put anybody's medical information on the web. If you work in a doctor's office, you don't have free speech rights to talk about the medical information you see. If you work for a lawyer's office, or if you're a police officer, you don't have free speech rights to discuss the cases that you're working on. Now, you probably are going to discuss it with your spouse. I think most people take it for granted that things are shared between spouses, but there's no free speech rights at work. There never has been free speech rights at work. You're in the private sector, people. Maybe it's different when you're a civil service job, but in the private sector, you can get fired, okay? And your boss can fire you for all manner of things, including your speech, including the fact that you're always telling someone about your religion, or always preaching your politics, or just always have a negative word to say about everybody. You can be fired for those things, okay? So I am so sick of hearing people as this interminable, is that even a word? As this unending controversy over football players not standing for the national anthem drags on, you keep hearing people say, well, of course they have a right to do it. Well, of course they have free speech rights. No, you don't. They're at work. They're being paid money. Now, there are gray areas for a football player. If a football player is on a charity event on his own time, maybe that's a gray area. But he's still representing the team, and if he says something that embarrasses the team, he's going to hear about it. And he might even be suspended, even though he's on his own time. Okay, but there is absolutely no gray area about game day, or about training camp, or about practice. Okay, these are absolute times when these football players are at work. Okay, you do not have free speech rights at work. Okay, did you notice that this doesn't happen in NBA basketball or in NHL hockey? Do you know why? Because they have a rule. In NHL, if you don't stand for the national anthem, you don't play in the game, period. Basically the same rule in the NBA. If you don't stand for the national anthem in the NBA, you can be suspended. You could even be suspended for more than one game if they decide you're a troublemaker. So these other sports have rules. And if the NFL wanted to make a rule like that, they could. Okay, so players do not have a free speech right to protest. It's common sense. You have a free speech right to shoot off your mouth all you want on your own time. Pointing, on your own time, not at work. Shoot off your mouth all you want on your own time. Protest all you want on your own time. This is television time. It's paid for by advertisers who are indirectly, and fans who are indirectly paying your salary, and you are at work. Show a professional attitude. Show a workmanlike attitude. Take pride in your work, and part of your job is to respect the country that gave you this opportunity to make $1 million chasing a football. Okay? If you want to, words cannot describe the unbelievable emotional immaturity of these athletes, that many of them have always been the hot shot. Many of them were the best, athlete in their grade school. Many of them then went on to be one of the best athletes in their middle school and in their high school, and then get an athletic scholarship, and then they had the opportunity to go to college for free and just work on their athletics, and then they get drafted by the NFL. And you know what? These people wanted to turn around, and I don't care if they're black or white or what they are, they want to turn around at that point after they've lived this charmed life, after they've been given these athletic gifts by God. They didn't earn them. And then they worked on athletics and had coaches and mentors and people helping them along. And then they got to go to college because of their athletics. And then they worked on their athletics some more. And then they got drafted by the NFL. And now they want to talk about oppression. None of these motherfuckers has ever been oppressed. They're all a bunch of fucking lottery winners. Except for the guy that gets the broken neck and winds up in the electric wheelchair. But the rest of them are a bunch of lottery winners. Even the ones that don't have long careers, even the ones that don't become famous, got to do something great. Okay? And they were not oppressed. They were not held back. You see the NFL keeping black people out of their teams? Are they keeping them out? They have a color line? I mean, come on. These guys, none of them are, and first of all, the taking a knee is not even necessarily a racial thing, because every player that does it has a different reason. None of them have a coherent rationale. None of them can give you 5 minutes on why they're doing it without sounding like a complete idiot. And half of them are complete idiots. Because let's face it, stereotypes have some basis in reality, and many of these guys have never really read very many books, even though they went to college, and many of them have never done a lot of deep thinking because it interferes with their practicing and training and all the other things they have going on in their lives. So these idiotic, emotional, immature man-children that want to talk about oppression. Oh, listen to this. Across the street, there's this couple that lives in the apartment building across the street, and at least once a week they come out yelling at each other. Go figure. Where was I? Emotional immaturity of people across the street, of people taking a knee. It's staggering. It's staggering. None of these people know what they're talking about when they talk about oppression, and having black skin alone does not give you an instant knowledge of oppression, okay? I mean, does anybody seriously think that Jesse Jackson's kids who went to private schools and grew up in a rich family, that they have a knowledge of oppression because of their color? I don't think they do. You know, look, I'm not a racist. I've been married to a black woman since 1989. We have mixed kids. But for these guys to talk about oppression and then act as if it's something that they've experienced and get all po-faced and sad, like, I'm down here for the oppressed people. You're down there because you're a whining, emotional baby that's going with the group and seeking attention, okay? And you're not down there for any coherent, thought-out reasoning, because I've heard your reasoning, and it's incredibly stupid and incoherent. So just know this, everyone, and let's just put this dialogue that everyone's having about this onto firm footing here, and let's just say one thing that we know for an absolute fact. Nobody has free speech rights at work. NFL players playing in a game on television are at work. They don't have a right to protest. They don't have a right to free speech. They're at work. The only reason they get away with this is because their employer lets them. The NBA doesn't let them. The NHL doesn't let them. Any sensible sport that wants to be popular won't let them. Now at this point, Roger Goodell, who has less brains than a trained monkey, this guy gets paid more money per wrong decision than any other incompetent CEO in the country. And he's not really a CEO, he's a commissioner. But I mean, he has literally in the last couple of years gone from being one of the worst NFL commissioners of all time to now in contention for one of the worst commissioners for any sport of all time. I mean, literally last year, this clown was throwing shade on the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was finally an exciting game. It was finally a competitive game. It was a white-knuckled game. It was one of the most exciting Super Bowls I've ever seen in my life. And instead of celebrating that, this guy lets the whole thing about the deflated ball become the story for weeks after the Super Bowl instead of talking up that Super Bowl. He's an idiot. He's an idiot. He should have just come out and said, hey, yeah, we're looking into the whole deflated ball thing, but you know what? Let's all grow up and acknowledge the fact that whether the balls were fully inflated or less inflated, that didn't change the outcome of the game. We all saw the plays that changed the outcome of the game, and it wasn't about how inflated the ball was. It was about the playing on the field. That's what he should have said. And when this whole taking a knee thing started, when Colin Kaepernick decided that he wasn't close enough to the ground warming the bench, and decided he wanted to get a little closer to the ground during the national anthem, basically Colin Kaepernick never felt at all oppressed while he was a starter. He only began to feel the oppression of his people once he was sitting on the bench. The fact is, Colin Kaepernick wants to spin this 20 years from now when he's talking to people in the old neighborhood. He wants to say, yeah, they cut me because I stood up for the community. He doesn't want to say, yeah, they cut me because I was a mediocre quarterback who threw a lot of interceptions. See, one sounds a lot better than the other. And once he started sitting on the bench, all of a sudden he decided, I'm not getting enough attention, and I'm an emotional baby, so I need to do something to draw attention to myself. I know, I'll refuse to stand for the national anthem. Well, Colin, I'm glad you don't have a job, and I hope you continue to not have a job. You know what? There's a lot of black men who don't have jobs. There's a lot of white men that don't have jobs. So we'll see you in the end. I have a job, but I'll see you standing in the unemployment line when I drive past in my car, if you ever come to the city and if there's ever an outdoor unemployment line. That was kind of far-fetched. But no, I don't feel sorry for Colin Kaepernick. I don't believe he knows diddly squat about his people or about oppression. Okay, the guy's a moron and he's a baby. Okay, so I don't care what he thinks. But I'll tell you what Roger Goodell should have done. The first time it happened, Roger Goodell should have made a statement and said, this is not acceptable in the NFL. And that first week that it happened, the first time, he should have called a meeting of team owners and said, this is important. We're having this meeting this week. If you can't make it, fine. But we're having a meeting and we're taking a vote on whether or not players should be required to stand for the national anthem. And they should have had that damn meeting, and you know the outcome of the vote would have been yes, they should be required if you had the team owners vote. Because the team owners, even if they hate America, which they probably don't since they got rich here, but even if they hate America, the team owners got to look after the bottom line. They got to protect the image of the club. They know a lot of football fans don't hate America. So if you took a vote of the team owners right after this started happening, they could have put in a rule in place and said, okay guys, the NFL respects America. The NFL respects our military. They respect our first responders. They respect the history of this country that has done a lot of great things. We haven't just done bad things. So the NFL respects all those things, so therefore the NFL is going to have a rule that if you don't stand for the national anthem, you don't play in the game. And if you're not a starter and you choose not to stand for the national anthem, you are suspended from suiting up for the next 3 games, something like that. So you got to give the people who are bench warmers anyways their incentive, you know. But as far as the starters, it would probably be sufficient just to tell them they can't play in that particular game. But there's no penalty that you could name, short of cutting a hand off, you know, Sharia style, that I wouldn't be for. I would be for penalizing these guys with any penalty. I'll get in a bidding war with anyone that wants to suggest a harsher penalty, because there's no penalty that the NFL could impose that I wouldn't be in favor of. If the NFL wanted to say tomorrow that anyone who doesn't stand for the national anthem is fired from the NFL, prohibited from playing in NFL games, and permanently banned from participating in our league or even buying a ticket, I would support that. So there's no punishment that I can name that isn't that you can name or I can name that is harsh enough. As far as I'm concerned, these guys are moronic babies. I've said that many times, and they deserve all the contempt that you can hurl on them. But in the meantime, I just want to get this one fact out there, and every person should repeat this, because this is not me talking. This is the law. You do not have free speech rights at work. You do not have the right to protest at work. When NFL players are at practice or at training camp or at a game, especially at a game, they are at work. It's indisputable, and they don't have free speech rights there, and they don't have the right to protest. And if you want to blame someone, blame that clown moron Goodell, worst commissioner in the history of sports, because he's the one that's let this fester and turn into an open wound that is literally tearing apart the football audience and injecting politics where it should have never been. It should have never been. Democrats and Republicans, blacks and whites, men and women, everyone should be able to go to a baseball game or a football game or whatever the fuck it is and forget about politics for a couple hours. That's all we ask as fans. Let's forget about our troubles for a couple hours and care about whether the ball moves down the field. That's all. And sports should be able to give them that. It's not too much to ask. And we as fans need to demand that sports give us that and not insult us by saying these people have a right to protest. They don't. They don't have free speech at work. No one does. Okay, that's all I have to say about that. Thanks for listening, guys and gals.